President Trump is calling for a ceasefire in northern Syria as chaos and clashes erupt across the region. The president is also hitting Turkey with tough economic sanctions after invading Syria last week.
This comes after President Trump withdrew U.S. troops from the northern part of the country, paving the way for Turkey to launch its military campaign against U.S. allied Kurdish fighters. Ben Tracy has the latest.
The President of the United States called on the President of Turkey to stop the invasion.
Vice President Mike Pence attempted damage control as criticism mounts of President Trump's abrupt decision to withdraw troops from Syria, allowing for Turkey's invasion.
We want an immediate ceasefire, and we want to begin negotiations between Turkey and Syrian defense forces.
The administration's initial statement announcing the withdrawal of troops set no boundaries for Turkey's military operation. But after bipartisan backlash, President Trump vowed to destroy Turkey's economy if it went through with this kind of invasion.
If there wasn't, there should have been a very clear sanctions threat provided during that conversation to prevent exactly what Erdogan ended up doing.
Now the White House is hitting Turkey's top government officials and ministries with sanctions, doubling steel tariffs to 50% and canceling negotiations over a $100 billion trade deal.
These sanctions are very, very strong.
While the U.S. will keep some troops in the region to prevent an ISIS resurgence, the president is broadly sticking by his initial decision to pull out and boasting of defeating 100% of the ISIS caliphate. As for the Kurdish fighters who were crucial in accomplishing that, Mr. Trump also said, let Syria and Assad protect the Kurds. Bashar al-Assad's Syrian government, a bitter enemy of the United States, is backed by Russia.
This alliance between the Kurds and Assad is not good for us.
Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell issued a strongly worded statement Monday saying he was gravely concerned by our nation's apparent response thus far, and that withdrawal would create a broader power vacuum in Syria that will be exploited by Iran and Russia.
Ben Tracy is joining us now from the White House, and CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes is joining us from Capitol Hill. So, Ben, first to you. The damage appears to already be done in northern Syria after President Trump essentially gave Turkey the green light to invade the region. We're seeing images coming out of there that are showing a carnage that has escalated in just 7 days. So what is the point of these sanctions and calls for a ceasefire?
Well, this appears to be damage control on the White House's part, kind of wanting to be seen as doing something. But these sanctions are likely to be too little too late. And a source tells CBS News that even administration officials acknowledge that this likely will not change Turkey's mind. And as you mentioned, the damage is done. They've crossed the border. They're very far into Syria. And now the death toll is mounting. It is interesting when you think of the White House approach here. President Trump had vowed to totally destroy Turkey's economy if it did an invasion like this. Well, these sanctions, while they will punish Turkey, they are not totally going to destroy its economy. So there is still some wiggle room there. On top of all of this, the timing of this is really interesting. President Erdogan of Turkey is scheduled to visit the White House next month, and we have asked White House officials if that meeting is still on, and so far they are saying that nothing has changed.
So, Nancy, it certainly seems as if the president made the decision to pull troops from northern Syria all on his own. It caught a lot of people off guard. So now moving forward, the president is making a lot of decisions about what to do in the aftermath. How is Congress managing this, or does Congress have the ability to, have input or control what the president does?
They have input, but as you've seen, that is not a fail-safe process. What Democrats are now trying to do is pass a resolution that would basically call on the president to change course in Syria. The cat would appear to be out of the bag, but regardless, what they want to do is get Republicans on record showing that they are not happy with the president's actions. Republicans have been talking about a package of sanctions on Turkey, and that is something that has bipartisan support that we should see move forward this week. But Democrats would like to go a step further, and now that they're all coming back to Capitol Hill after a 2-week break, we'll be able to see just how swiftly Democrats move to try to get Republicans on the record on this issue.
Nancy, though, the statements coming out of Mitch McConnell's office do not seem. I mean, you've got Lindsey Graham on one hand saying, yeah, the president's back on track and this is a great move. Lindsey McConnell seems to be more circumspect.
Right. I mean, there was no secret that Mitch McConnell was caught off guard, just like everyone else, by the president's agreement with Erdogan to pull U.S. troops out of Syria, and he was very disappointed in it. And anything that Congress would do at this point, frankly, would only be trying to mop up a mess that has already been made and is still getting bigger.
One more for you, Nancy, but we're going to switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the latest developments on the impeachment inquiry. Today, after more than two-week recess, where are we with the impeachment inquiry, and who do we expect to hear from this week?
A lot of stuff happening behind closed doors, which is hard for the American people to know where we actually are.
Well, I mean, behind closed doors yesterday, I feel like we got some major bombshells, and that's just what was leaked from
the
Fiona
readouts,
Hill.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Yes, at this point, there are so many people that lawmakers want to talk to that we're looking at one day-long deposition from a top current or former official every single day. And yesterday's deposition with Fiona Hill, who was the president's top Russia advisor, turned out to be a blockbuster because she said that the former head of the National Security Council, John Bolton, was so troubled by what he saw as this sort of freelance ad hoc policy in Ukraine that was being carried out by Rudy Giuliani and Gordon Sondland, and now invoking the name of the acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, that he urged Hill to go to NSC lawyers and inform them about it. He likened it to a drug deal that was being carried out by Giuliani and his allies. And so now, today, we're going to hear more about this from George Kent, who was the current Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. He oversaw the former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, and he is likely going to be asked about the efforts, again, by Giuliani to get Yovanovitch removed from her post as U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, and also the efforts by Giuliani and others to smear her reputation. All, it appears, in an effort to have her replaced by someone who would be more willing to carry out the president's goals of getting Ukraine to launch investigations into his campaign rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, who sat on the board of a Ukrainian energy firm.
You know, Ben, it's interesting. The president has been very active on Twitter over the last couple of days, even more than typical. And he's tweeting about a wide range of subjects. But it does seem that with the sort of the twin controversies, you've got what's going on in northern Syria, and then you've got what's going on in Washington, D.C., that there doesn't seem to be a sort of a concerted effort to address them in a systematic and strategic way. I mean, the president is tweeting about Adam Schiff, but then he's tweeting about farmers and he's tweeting about China. I just want to know what you're hearing from your sources about what they plan to do going forward.
Well, systematic and strategic are not two words that have often been used to describe the White House decision-making policy, and I think even people here internally would acknowledge that. And it was telling yesterday that the president really had no events on his public schedule, and we did not see him at all, but he did send the vice president out and the secretary of the Treasury to try to do cleanup duty on this. So yes, you have both this mess of what's going on in Syria. You also have the impeachment hearings on Capitol Hill. And when it comes to impeachment, I mean, it already feels like a month ago, but it was just 1 week ago that the White House sent that extraordinary letter to Nancy Pelosi basically saying, we're not going to cooperate at all with this thing you're doing because we don't view it as legitimate. If you want it to be legitimate, take a vote and actually launch a formal investigation. And what we're finding out behind the scenes is that when it comes to, for instance, the testimony yesterday of Fiona Hill, the White House did try to limit her testimony. They didn't try to block it, but they did try to limit what she could talk about. We've obtained letters from White House counsel and her attorneys that show this back and forth where the White House was trying to claim executive privilege on some of the things that she was going to talk about. Because that hearing was not public, we don't know exactly what she refused to talk about, if anything. But the White House is behind the scenes trying to manage that impeachment, the impeachment fallout, but also this Syria mess, which really they are getting it from both sides on that, and that certainly complicates the issue of the impeachment investigations.
So in the meantime, Nancy, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, the man at the center of what many have called a conspiracy theory that Rudy Giuliani was trying to get sort of dirt on, he is speaking. He did an interview. I want to play a little bit of that.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
Do you regret being on the board to begin with?
No, I don't regret being on the board. What I regret is not taking into account that there would be a Rudy Giuliani and a president of the United States that would be listening to this ridiculous conspiracy idea, which has, again, been completely debunked by everyone.
So we're hearing from Hunter Biden on the day, not the eve, but the day that his father is going to be taking the stage in the next Democratic presidential debate. Does this factor into the impeachment inquiry in any way, or is it sort of like a sideshow? Because at the core of the inquiry is whether or not the president was attempting a quid pro quo.
I think it is something of a sideshow, although it's certainly fascinating to hear from Hunter Biden himself say that he doesn't think that he did anything unethical, but he does think that it was a mistake because it gave unethical people the opportunity to attack his father, who is running for president. And clearly this has been enough of a concern for the Bidens that they are now rethinking things. And Hunter Biden has promised that if his father is elected, he is not going to do any foreign work, trying to draw a contrast between the Biden family now and the Trump family, where obviously the president's family members are doing work all over the world. But it was interesting that Hunter Biden said that, in retrospect, perhaps he shouldn't have joined some of these foreign boards.
All right. Ben Tracy for us at the White House, Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill. Thank you both. We appreciate it as always. Thanks.
You're welcome.